The air buzzed with tension as executives filed in for what promised to be yet another contentious meeting. Apex, once a thriving tech startup, had hit a rough patch. Sales were down. Investors were restless, and morale among employees was at an all-time low. At the head of the table sat Richard Caldwell, the CEO. A tall man with sharp features and an even sharper tongue. Richard prided himself on his no-nonsense approach to leadership. Unfortunately, this often translated into arrogance and disdain for anyone he deemed beneath him, which included most people outside his inner circle. Surrounding him were his usual entourage. Vice presidents, directors, and other high-ranking officials, each vying for his approval while masking their own insecurities behind expensive suits and rehearsed smiles. As the meeting began, one figure stood out, not because she was powerful or influential, but because she seemed so out of place. Sarah Bennett, a middle-aged woman dressed in a simple gray uniform, quietly moved about the room, tidying up after the previous meeting. Her presence went largely unnoticed by the executives, who treated her as part of the furniture rather than a human being. To them, she was just the cleaning lady, someone whose job was to clean up their messes, both literally and figuratively. But appearances can be deceiving. What none of these self-important individuals realized was that Sarah wasn't merely a custodian. She was the founder and owner of Apex Innovations. Years ago, she had poured her heart and soul into building the company from scratch, working late nights and overcoming countless obstacles to turn it into a success. Even now, despite handing over day-to-day operations to hired professionals, she chose to stay connected to her roots by continuing to work as a cleaner, a decision that baffled some but grounded her deeply. Today's meeting would prove pivotal, not just for the struggling company, but for everyone involved. As tensions mounted and tempers flared, Sarah listened intently, her quiet demeanor masking the storm brewing inside her. Little did the executives know they were about to learn a lesson in humility and the true meaning of respect the hard way. The meeting started with Richard Caldwell slamming his fist on the table, his face red with frustration. "This is unacceptable," he barked, glaring at the executives seated around him. "Our numbers are in the gutter, and I'm tired of hearing excuses. Someone needs to take responsibility for this mess." One by one, the executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact as Richard laid into them. When no one volunteered to shoulder the blame, he turned his ire toward an easy target: the support staff. "You know what the problem is?" Richard sneered, leaning back in his chair. "It's the culture here. People don't respect this company anymore. Not even the people we pay to keep it running." He gestured dismissively toward Sarah, who was quietly emptying a wastebasket near the corner of the room. "Take her, for example," he continued, pointing directly at Sarah. "She's supposed to be keeping this place spotless, but half the time, I walk into my office and find dust on my desk. Do you think Steve Jobs would have tolerated that kind of laziness? No way." A few of the executives chuckled nervously, unsure whether to join in or remain silent. Emboldened by their reaction, Richard pressed on. "Honestly, if we want to turn this ship around, maybe we should start by getting rid of dead weight like her." Sarah froze mid-motion, her hands gripping the edge of the wastebasket. She didn't say a word, but her knuckles whitened as she absorbed the insult. Another executive, a wiry man named Greg, decided to pile on. "To be fair, Richard, it's not just her," he said smugly. "These kinds of people, they don't understand the value of hard work. They just show up, do the bare minimum, and expect a paycheck." "Exactly," Richard agreed, nodding emphatically. "They have no idea what it takes to run a company like this. Hell, I bet she doesn't even know what we do here beyond pushing a mop around." More laughter erupted from the group, though it was forced and awkward. One woman, Lisa, hesitated before chimed in, clearly trying to ingratiate herself with Richard. "It's almost like they're invisible, isn't it? You forget they're even there until something goes wrong." Through it all, Sarah remained eerily calm. Her movements slowed but never stopped. She finished emptying the wastebasket, straightened up, and began wiping down the glass walls of the boardroom. Inside, however, her mind raced. Each cutting remark dug deeper than the last, not because she doubted her worth, but because she knew exactly how much she had sacrificed to build the very company these people were tearing apart. As the insults continued, Sarah allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She thought about the early days of Apex Innovations. Sleepless nights spent coding software, cold calls made to potential clients, and endless rejections that only fueled her determination. She remembered eating ramen noodles for weeks just to make payroll, and the pride she felt when her first big client signed on. And now, years later, here she was, watching a group of entitled strangers mock her contributions while lounging in offices she had worked tirelessly to create. Still, she said nothing. Instead, she let them dig their own graves. Every snide comment, every condescending laugh, added another layer to the reckoning they didn't see coming. By the time Richard wrapped up his tirade, the atmosphere in the room was thick with tension. Some of the executives looked visibly uncomfortable, perhaps sensing they'd crossed a line. Others seemed oblivious, still congratulating themselves for their cleverness. None of them noticed the subtle shift in Sarah's demeanor or the fire burning behind her calm exterior. When the meeting finally adjourned, Sarah stepped out of the shadows. With quiet authority, she cleared her throat and addressed the room. "If I could have your attention for just a moment," she said, her voice steady and commanding. Every head turned toward her, confusion etched on their faces. It was clear they hadn't expected her to speak, and certainly not with such confidence. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Sarah. For the first time, the executives seemed to truly see her, not as a background figure or a faceless cleaner, but as someone who demanded attention. Her posture was straight, her gaze unwavering, and there was an undeniable authority in her voice that silenced even Richard Caldwell. "If you'll indulge me for just a moment," Sarah continued, her tone calm yet firm, "I'd like to address some of the concerns raised during this meeting." She paused, letting her words sink in before taking a step closer to the table. Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression a mix of irritation and amusement. "Oh, really?" he said with a smirk. "By all means, enlighten us. What pearls of wisdom do you have to share?" Sarah ignored his sarcasm and began speaking, her voice carrying a weight that commanded respect. "First, let me say how fascinating it is to hear opinions about what makes this company tick, from people who clearly have no idea how it actually works." Several executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing they were about to be on the receiving end of something they hadn't anticipated. "For instance," Sarah continued, her eyes scanning the room, "you mentioned dead weight earlier, Mr. Caldwell. I assume you were referring to employees like me, those who work behind the scenes to keep things running smoothly. But tell me, when was the last time any of you stepped foot in our manufacturing facility, or spoke directly with our customer service team, or even bothered to learn the names of the people who clean your offices every night?" Her questions hung in the air, unanswered. The executives exchanged uneasy glances, unsure where this was headed. "Let me make one thing clear," Sarah said, her voice rising slightly but remaining controlled. "Every single person in this company plays a vital role in its success, including those you dismiss so casually. And if you think pushing papers and attending meetings somehow makes you more valuable than the people who keep this building operational, then you're sorely mistaken." Richard scoffed, attempting to regain control of the situation. "That's a nice speech, but forgive me if I don't take business advice from someone whose job description involves scrubbing toilets." Sarah's lips curled into a faint smile, one that sent a chill through the room. "Funny you should mention my job description," she said, pulling a small stack of papers from her pocket. "Because contrary to what you seem to believe, my role here isn't limited to cleaning." She placed the documents on the table and slid them toward Richard. "Take a look at these. They might jog your memory." Curiosity getting the better of him, Richard picked up the papers and began flipping through them. His smug expression faltered almost immediately. The color drained from his face as he realized what he was looking at. Official ownership documents, board resolutions, and financial statements, all bearing Sarah's name as the founder and sole owner of Apex Innovations. What is this?" Richard stammered, his voice trembling. "It's exactly what it looks like," Sarah replied coolly. I founded this company over 20 years ago. I built it from the ground up with zero help from anyone in this room, I might add. And while I've entrusted others to manage day-to-day operations, I've always stayed involved. Call it nostalgia, call it humility, or call it whatever you want. But yes, I still choose to clean occasionally because it reminds me of where we started. The room erupted into chaos. Executives whispered frantically among themselves, their faces pale with shock. Some tried to deny what they were hearing, while others scrambled to justify their earlier comments. Greg, the wiry VP who had mocked Sarah's work ethic, broke the silence. "Wait a minute," he sputtered. "You're saying you're the owner?" "That's right," Sarah confirmed, crossing her arms. "And now that we've cleared that up, let me tell you why I'm here today. I came to observe, to see firsthand how this company is being run under your leadership, Mr. Caldwell. And frankly, I'm appalled." She turned her piercing gaze on Richard, who looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Your arrogance, your lack of empathy, and your complete disregard for the people who make this company great are unacceptable. You've created a toxic environment where employees feel undervalued and disrespected. And today, you proved that you're incapable of leading with integrity." Sarah took a deep breath, her next words cutting through the tension like a knife. "Effective immediately, you and your entire executive team are fired." Gasps filled the room as the reality of her declaration sank in. Richard shot to his feet, spluttering in disbelief. "You can't do this. This is outrageous." "I assure you I can," Sarah replied, her tone icy. "As the owner of this company, I have the final say. And based on everything I've seen and heard today, none of you deserve to hold positions of power within Apex Innovations." With that, she turned on her heel and walked toward the door, leaving the stunned executives to process the fallout of their own actions. As she exited the boardroom, she felt a sense of vindication, not out of spite, but because justice had been served. The room was in utter disarray as Sarah's words echoed through the air like a thunderclap. Richard Caldwell, once the picture of confidence and authority, now stood frozen, his face flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation. The other executives, too, were reeling from the bombshell revelation. Some stared at Sarah in disbelief, while others frantically whispered among themselves, searching for a way to salvage their positions, or at least save face. Sarah paused at the doorway, turning back to address the group one last time. Her expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "Before I go," she said, "let me be clear about why this decision is necessary." She stepped closer to the table, her presence commanding absolute silence. "When I started Apex Innovations, it wasn't just about making money. It was about creating something meaningful, something that would improve lives, both for our customers and for the people who work here. But under your leadership, Mr. Caldwell, this company has strayed far from those values. You've fostered a culture of arrogance, disrespect, and fear. A culture that has no place in any organization I oversee." Richard tried to interrupt, his voice rising defensively. "With all due respect, Ms. Bennett, don't—" Sarah cut him off sharply, her eyes locking onto his. "You lost the right to speak when you treated this company and its employees as disposable. Do you think success gives you license to belittle others? To mock hard work and dedication simply because someone doesn't wear a suit or sit in a corner office?" Her words struck a nerve, not just with Richard but with everyone present. Lisa, the woman who had earlier chimed in with condescending remarks, looked visibly shaken, tears welling up in her eyes. Greg, the wiry VP, slumped in his chair, avoiding eye contact altogether. "I built this company on principles of respect and collaboration," Sarah continued. "Every employee, from the receptionist to the engineers to the janitorial staff, plays a critical role in our success. And yet, you've spent months tearing them down, blaming them for problems you created yourselves. That ends today." She reached into her pocket and pulled out another document, sliding it across the table toward Richard. "This is your termination letter. It includes severance terms, which are generous considering the circumstances. My assistant will collect your ID badge and escort you out of the building shortly. Richard snatched the paper, scanning it quickly before letting it fall to the table. You'll regret this, he spat bitterly. Apex won't survive without me. Sarah raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. On the contrary, I believe Apex will thrive because of this change. Your toxic leadership has held us back long enough. Now we can focus on rebuilding not just our profits but our culture. Turning to the rest of the team, she added, as for the rest of you, consider this a wake-up call. If you ever hope to lead again, start by learning how to treat people with dignity. Until then, pack your things and leave. The finality of her statement left no room for argument. One by one, the executives rose from their seats, their faces masks of shame and defeat. Some muttered apologies under their breath, though Sarah paid them little mind. Actions spoke louder than words, and she knew better than to trust hollow promises. As they filed out of the boardroom, Sarah took a moment to reflect on the irony of the situation. These individuals, who had spent years climbing the corporate ladder and amassing power, had been brought down not by competitors or market forces, but by their own hubris. They had underestimated her, dismissed her contributions, and ultimately sealed their own fate. Once the room was empty, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't triumph she felt, but relief. For too long, she had watched from the sidelines as the company she loved was mismanaged and mistreated. Today, she had taken a stand, not just for herself, but for every employee who had ever been undervalued or overlooked. Outside the boardroom, whispers spread like wildfire as news of the firings reached the rest of the staff. Employees gathered in clusters, exchanging shocked glances and hushed conversations. Many had endured years of mistreatment under Richard's regime, and seeing him humbled brought a sense of vindication. Word quickly reached the cleaning crew, who erupted into applause when they heard what Sarah had done. "We always knew you were special, Sarah," one of her co-workers exclaimed, pulling her into a hug. Sarah chuckled softly, brushing off the praise. "It's not about me," she said. "It's about reminding everyone that every job matters. Every person matters. That's the kind of company I want us to be." By the end of the day, the story had spread throughout the building and beyond. Former employees shared posts online, recounting their own experiences of working under Richard's leadership. The narrative painted a damning picture of his tenure, further solidifying public support for Sarah's decision. For the first time in years, there was a renewed sense of hope within Apex Innovations. The weight of fear and resentment lifted, replaced by excitement for what lay ahead. And at the center of it all stood Sarah, quietly leading by example, proving that true leadership isn't about titles or egos. It's about lifting others up and doing what's right, even when it's hard. By the following morning, news of Sarah Bennett's dramatic intervention had spread far beyond the walls of Apex Innovations. An anonymous employee leaked details of the incident to social media, posting screenshots of Richard Caldwell's termination letter alongside a scathing account of his leadership style. The post quickly went viral, sparking outrage and admiration in equal measure. Hashtags like #RespectEveryRole, #ApexReborn, and #SarahBennettHero trended globally, turning Sarah into an overnight sensation. Headlines blared across major news outlets. Cleaning woman fires CEO after shocking boardroom showdown. Founder hides in plain sight, takes down toxic leadership team. The day the bosses got schooled. Inside Apex Innovations' dramatic turnaround, journalists scrambled to piece together Sarah's backstory, uncovering interviews and archival footage from her early days as an entrepreneur. Stories emerged of her relentless work ethic, innovative ideas, and commitment to fairness, traits that had earned her respect long before she became a viral sensation. One former colleague described her as the heart and soul of Apex, while another called her a force of nature who never forgot where she came from. Public reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Social media users hailed Sarah as a hero, praising her for standing up to corporate elitism and championing the value of every worker. Memes depicting her as a superhero cleaning lady flooded platforms like Twitter and Instagram, with captions like, "When the CEO underestimates the janitor, And not all heroes wear capes. Some carry mops. But it wasn't just memes and hashtags. The story resonated deeply with people from all walks of life. Factory workers, teachers, nurses, and service staff shared their own experiences of being undervalued or mistreated by those in power. Many thanked Sarah for shining a light on the importance of respecting all forms of labor, regardless of status or salary. Former employees of Apex Innovations also came forward, recounting stories of toxic behavior under Richard Caldwell's leadership. Some described how he routinely dismissed feedback from lower-level staff, while others recounted instances of verbal abuse during meetings. One former HR manager revealed that turnover rates had skyrocketed during his tenure, citing low morale and lack of support as key factors. "I stayed quiet because I needed the job," one ex-employee wrote in a LinkedIn post that garnered thousands of likes. "But today, I feel vindicated knowing someone finally stood up to him. Thank you, Sarah, for reminding us that we deserve better." Richard Caldwell and his team fared far worse in the court of public opinion. Photos of them leaving the building, heads bowed, faces grim, were plastered across tabloids and blogs. Comment sections lit up with vitriol, labeling them as arrogant bullies and toxic leaders. Attempts to defend themselves only backfired, with critics pointing out their hypocrisy and claiming they were misunderstood after years of mistreating others. Their professional reputations crumbled almost overnight. Recruiters reported receiving dozens of calls from companies explicitly blacklisting the executives, citing concerns about workplace culture. Networking events became awkward affairs as colleagues avoided them, and industry conferences quietly rescinded speaking invitations. Even Richard's LinkedIn profile, which once boasted glowing endorsements and accolades, was inundated with negative comments, forcing him to disable public access. Meanwhile, Sarah found herself thrust into the spotlight in ways she hadn't anticipated. Invitations poured in for interviews, keynote speeches, and awards ceremonies. Business magazines clamored to feature her on their covers, dubbing her Entrepreneur of the Year and a new model for leadership. Despite the attention, she remained refreshingly humble, using each opportunity to advocate for workplace equality and inclusivity. In one widely shared interview, Sarah addressed the lessons she hoped others would take from the incident. "It's not about me firing the CEO," she said. "It's about recognizing that everyone brings value to the table. Whether you're coding software, answering phones, or cleaning offices, your work matters. And if we want to build stronger, healthier organizations, we need to start treating people accordingly." Her message struck a chord, inspiring real-world changes. Companies began reevaluating their policies, implementing initiatives to foster respect and collaboration across all levels of employment. Some even adopted programs encouraging executives to spend time working alongside frontline staff, a direct nod to Sarah's hands-on approach. For Apex Innovations, the transformation was immediate and profound. Morale soared as employees embraced a renewed sense of purpose. Projects stalled under Richard's leadership gained momentum, driven by teams eager to prove themselves under Sarah's guidance. Customer satisfaction ratings improved, investor confidence rebounded, and within months, the company was back on track to exceed its financial goals. Yet, despite the accolades and success, Sarah refused to let fame change her. She continued wearing her gray uniform, choosing to clean the boardroom herself at least once a week. To her, it was a reminder of her roots, a way to stay grounded amidst the whirlwind of attention. As she moved through the halls of Apex, employees greeted her warmly, their gratitude evident in every smile and handshake. They weren't just thanking her for firing Richard. They were thanking her for restoring their faith in what the company could be. A place where hard work was celebrated, kindness was prioritized, and everyone felt valued. In the weeks following the dramatic boardroom showdown, Sarah Bennett wasted no time in implementing sweeping changes at Apex Innovations. Her vision was clear: to rebuild the company not just as a profitable enterprise, but as a model for ethical leadership and workplace culture. The first step? Cleaning house, literally and figuratively. Sarah began by appointing new leaders who shared her values of inclusivity, transparency, and respect. Gone were the days of hiring executives based solely on flashy resumes or prestigious degrees. Instead, she promoted individuals who had demonstrated loyalty, integrity, and a genuine passion for the company's mission. Among them was Maria Rodriguez, a mid-level manager who had spent over a decade climbing the ranks at Apex. Known for her collaborative approach and deep understanding of the business, Maria was named interim CEO, a decision that earned widespread approval from employees. Next, Sarah introduced initiatives aimed at fostering a more supportive and equitable work environment. She launched a mentorship program pairing senior staff with entry-level employees, ensuring that everyone had access to guidance and growth opportunities. Regular town hall meetings became mandatory, giving workers at all levels a platform to voice concerns, share ideas, and celebrate successes. Feedback mechanisms were strengthened, with anonymous surveys allowing employees to report issues without fear of retaliation. One of the most impactful changes came in the form of recognition programs designed to celebrate contributions often overlooked in corporate settings. Monthly awards were introduced to honor outstanding performance, not just among executives or top earners, but across departments. Custodial staff, IT technicians, receptionists, and other behind-the-scenes roles received public acknowledgement for their hard work. For many, this simple act of validation made all the difference. Sarah also prioritized diversity and inclusion, partnering with organizations to recruit talent from underrepresented communities. Training sessions on unconscious bias and cultural sensitivity became standard for all employees, while affinity groups provided safe spaces for marginalized voices to connect and thrive. Slowly but surely, Apex transformed into a workplace where people felt seen, heard, and valued. The ripple effects of these changes extended far beyond employee satisfaction. Productivity soared as teams worked together more cohesively, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose. Innovation flourished, with employees feeling empowered to take risks and propose bold ideas. Clients noticed the shift too, praising the company's improved responsiveness and customer-centric approach. Within a year, Apex wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. For Sarah, the greatest reward came not in the numbers or accolades, but in the everyday moments that reminded her why she started this journey in the first place. Walking through the office, she saw smiles instead of frowns, high fives instead of hushed complaints. Employees greeted her warmly, sharing stories of how the new policies had positively impacted their lives. One custodian approached her during lunch break, tears in his eyes, to thank her for making him feel like an integral part of the team. "People don't leave jobs," Sarah often said during interviews. "They leave bad cultures. If we can create a culture where everyone feels respected and appreciated, then success will follow naturally." Her philosophy resonated deeply, inspiring other companies to adopt similar practices. Leaders from industries around the world reached out to learn from her example, seeking advice on how to foster healthier workplaces. Sarah welcomed the opportunity to share her story, viewing it as a chance to drive systemic change. Despite her newfound fame, Sarah remained true to herself. She continued working as a cleaner part-time, finding joy in the simplicity of the task. To her, it was a reminder of the grit and determination that had brought her this far, and a testament to the idea that no job is beneath anyone. As Apex celebrated its best fiscal quarter in years, Sarah stood before her team during an all-hands meeting, reflecting on the journey they'd taken together. "We've come so far," she said, her voice filled with pride. "But let's never forget what got us here. Hard work, humility, and heart. Let's keep building a company we can all be proud of, one that lifts each other up and leaves a lasting legacy." The room erupted into applause, a standing ovation that seemed to stretch on forever. In that moment, Sarah knew she had succeeded, not just as a founder or leader, but as someone who had inspired others to dream bigger, work harder, and care deeper. A year had passed since the fateful day Sarah Bennett revealed her identity and fired Richard Caldwell and his toxic team. Apex Innovations was no longer the struggling, demoralized company it once was. It had become a beacon of innovation, inclusivity, and success. Under Sarah's leadership, the company earned numerous accolades, including Best Place to Work awards and recognition for its commitment to sustainability and social responsibility. Richard Caldwell, on the other hand, faded into obscurity. His attempts to revive his career were met with rejection after rejection, as companies shied away from associating with his tarnished reputation. Rumors circulated that he had taken a low-level consulting job in another state, a far cry from the corner office he once occupied. The rest of his executive team fared little better, their names synonymous with arrogance and poor leadership. For Sarah, life settled into a rhythm of purpose and fulfillment. Though she continued to receive offers for speaking engagements and book deals, she declined most of them, preferring to focus on what mattered most: her company and its people. She spent her days mentoring young entrepreneurs, advocating for workplace equality, and ensuring that Apex remained a place where everyone could thrive. Maya, one of the custodians who had worked alongside Sarah for years, often joked about how much things had changed. "Remember when we used to tiptoe around the executives?" she'd say with a laugh. "Now they're the ones asking us for advice." Sarah chuckled along, but inside, she felt immense gratitude for Maya, for her team, and for the lessons she'd learned along the way. Her decision to stay humble, even at the height of her success, served as a constant reminder that true greatness lies not in titles or wealth, but in the ability to inspire and uplift others. On the anniversary of the boardroom showdown, Sarah gathered her employees for a special celebration. As they stood together, clinking glasses and sharing stories, she took a moment to reflect on how far they'd come. From the brink of collapse to becoming an industry leader, Apex's journey was proof that kindness and integrity could overcome even the deepest challenges. "To all of you," Sarah said, raising her glass, "thank you for believing in this company and in each other. Let's continue building something extraordinary." The room erupted into cheers, a testament to the unity and resilience that now defined Apex Innovations. And as Sarah looked around at the faces of her colleagues, she knew one thing for certain: the future was bright, not just for Apex, but for anyone willing to embrace the values of respect, humility, and hard work. Because in the end, it wasn't about who owned the company. It was about the people who made it whole.